So my name is Lee, and I've got a couple of businesses I'll tell you a little bit about. The first one is Agency Trailblazer. So I run a podcast, and we've got a community of thousands around the world, which is awesome. And we teach them how to run design agencies more effectively, and we've created an event off the back of that. So we have a yearly party up in Wellingborough, just an hour from London, which is awesome. So we've had a great time over the last 4 years building that up. That was actually a picture of the event. There's me looking handsome. And we also run a company called Event Engine, which helps event organisers like me build really cool websites. So that's what we're all about. Now today, I would love to talk to you, first of all, about a burning question that I think is in our industry. And there is no right or wrong answer, and I am not slagging off any solutions. So that's my disclaimer from the very beginning. But we often hear of all-in-one platforms. If you think about the event organizer, we've got tons and tons of different disparate pieces of software all over the place that do incredibly cool things, but at the same time they may not necessarily talk to each other, and this creates a big problem for us. We have disconnected pools of data, and it can be a pain in the neck. At the same time, when you've got an all-in-one platform, you're like, hey, this could bring everything in-house, and that's fantastic. But then that raises its own issues, and I've put a few on here. If we're going to go for, say, an all-in-one, is that going to mold to whatever my business processes are? And bear in mind, as your event company grows, your processes are going to change. So if you're stuck with a system that does what it says on the tin, is that necessarily going to be best for you in 2 years' time? Can it be customized? Can it be added to or changed? Can it be integrated with something? So does it have an API? Is the data accessible? And then finally, what's the business continuity on that? And that's one of the biggest issues I think that a lot of us has. Our data is essential for our events. We need to be able to run our events based on data, based on last year's data. That's going to feed in to what's going to happen in the following year. So what if the company that we're trusting all of our information with disappears overnight or doesn't have a way that we can export that information and put it somewhere else? So these are all really important questions. And like I said, I'm not slagging anything off. The purpose of this is to get people to join this conversation down here, which is called EMS Ding Dong. And what we're doing is we're having conversations with event organizers as well as event suppliers so that we can help really just unpack all of the crap. Let's face it, there is an awful lot of BS out there with regards to what these amazing systems do, and this does that and that does the other. And there's lots of business talk that I frankly can't understand half of it, big long buzzwords that are frankly boring and mean nothing. And what we really want to do is have some good conversations and say, what does this system do? What do I need from my platform? And then perhaps an all-in-one is right for you, or perhaps something else is right for you. But I think there is too much big buzzwords and B2B talk in the industry, and people can't cut through that. So me and Tim, that's Tim over there, handsome guy, have started this conversation, and there's already been a few live streams that we've done, which have been really, really good fun. Now, one of the reasons why I'm here today is I want to share with you some massive mistakes that I have made. We've implemented an all-in-one solution, and we've also implemented multiple solutions connected together. Spoiler alert, neither worked. So you know I'm not on this stage to slag anything off, but let's go through what happened. So a few years ago, I was employed as the Salesforce administrator for a company. My full-time job was to look after the CRM of this huge corporation. They just spent £200,000 getting this thing implemented, and I was the guy who had to make sure that everybody used it, that the data was all accessible, etc., etc. And over the course of the years, things just went from bad to worse. It worked initially for the sales team, but then the sales team weren't taking on the responsibility of putting the data in. It worked initially for the accounts team, but then as the data got out of date, we had a stressed out accounts team who was then having to do stuff in spreadsheets. We had a service department over here who had no access to any of that information, who had a completely separate system, and I was then tasked with trying to export stuff and import stuff almost on a daily basis. So I became like a physical embodiment of Blender or Zapier or whatever those apps are that you see nowadays where you can integrate multiple solutions. That was pretty much my job, and that was in a very expensive position to have. What we found we had to do was invest in lots of custom code. I can now create programs for Salesforce simply because it didn't do what that business needed, and I had to add features to it to make sure it could happen. The cost started to spiral as well, because to service the service department over here, we were having to bring them in and add other add-ons. So if you think we were spending 30 grand a year on licensing after the 200K investment to get it implemented, that 30K then went to 60K, went to 70K, and before long we were spending 100K plus my job to keep this thing going, and it was not good fun for me, nor was it good fun for the customer. I mentioned as well that users weren't adopting the tool. You'll get an initial excitement, hey, this is amazing, this does everything I want it to do, and people start to put information in, but some people will push against it. Oh, you're spying on me, I don't want to have to put all this information in, etc. And the data degrades over time, and as that happens, other people start to lose confidence in that product, and you don't get the user uptake. And that's exactly the problem we had. Half the time, I was chasing people for data, getting it into spreadsheets, and then importing it into places where I shouldn't have had to have done. Yeah, I've covered all that, and yeah, we had to hire more consultants basically to work out what was going wrong. So that was the solution where we used Salesforce and multiple other programs stitched together to try and solve our business problems. And to be frank, we built up a massive issue for ourselves. Now what we did was we then went for an alternative product. We went the complete other way. Now, we're in a position here where we've got all of these different pieces of information everywhere. We're stressed out. No one's using it. I am the stressed out guy who's implementing data into all these different systems, and we're trying to keep everything updated. So we thought, well, let's go for the all-in-one. Let's go all in on this. Spoiler alert, this didn't work either. Let me tell you about that. So one day I rock up, and I thought I was being fired because I was being brought into the office, and the finance director sits me down. He's like, Lee, got some bad news for you, mate. I was like, oh no, I'm being fired. This is horrible. He said, well, it's kind of good and bad news. You've got to learn a new system, but it's great news because it's this all-in-one system that's going to allow us to import all of our data, and then you won't be running around like a blue-ass fly trying to keep everyone updated, and everyone's going to use this, and it's going to be the future. So we got dead excited by it. I actually got excited by it because I wasn't being fired, so I was very happy to take over this system. And what this positioned itself as was an accounts, a service, a sales, a marketing. It pretty much said it did everything on the tin. And that really attracted the finance director, who was the wrong person, and we'll find out why in a minute. But the finance director was the person who made this decision based on A, some numbers, and B, something that sounded good because we had a very big problem in our company, which was data all over the place in multiple systems. So here we are. I do what I'm told to. My pay grade wasn't high enough to push back against this, so we then had to install servers and pay really high licensing costs. Then what we realized was the system didn't quite do what we needed, so we had to pay them a whole awful lot of money for them to just patch little things in for us, just to match processes that we had. So those costs spiraled out of control. When we then started implementing apps, which was one of the deal breakers with Salesforce back then, and this company said they had apps, it turned out that we had to buy Windows 6.0 mobiles only. So we had to buy all these old mobiles that were being phased out just to be able to connect these things. But then we realized we had to boost our internet connection because we only had a basic 2-on-2 meg connection. We had to increase that to 100 meg, 10 up, so that we could get all this data in. It was a nightmare. So by the end of another 2 years, we'd spent another £300,000 to £400,000 on an all-in-one solution. So over here, we've gone Salesforce, and it's all been a complete mess. And then over here, we thought we found the answer, and it's all been a complete freaking mess. So what was the problem, and why didn't either one work? Well, that is partly why EMS Ding Dong exists, because we want to keep having these conversations. There are so many amazing companies, even in this room. I recommend you go and check them all out afterwards. Some are doing all-in-one solutions, and they're fantastic. Some are doing a part of it, and equally, they are amazing. But what is the problem? Why didn't those two solutions work? And for us, and I think for most companies and for most event organizers, the problem isn't all of the amazing technology that's around there. The problem isn't that they don't all talk to each other. The big problem for most of us is actually the business processes that we have. We're actually our own worst enemy as businesses. And let's just take a look at here. The problem with our business, if you add it all up, about $500,000 spent on 2 different projects. Both failed. Both did not achieve things. People left. It was a nightmare. Our full business process was not documented. We didn't have a full business process. We knew what we were doing. Each department kind of knew what they were doing, and they would train other people, but no one knew why they were doing it necessarily. It's just, this is what we've always done for the last 6 years. We do it this way. You need to do that. Fill in that spreadsheet there. Do that. Give that person a call at that point. And that's essentially what the process was. Lots of different processes across different departments. What we also then had done, because we've not documented any of these processes, we've not streamlined any of the processes. So the sales department were doing the same thing that the marketing department were doing, just in a slightly different system. So you've got this duplication of effort throughout the entire business because we hadn't ever sat down and gone, how do we operate? And does this make sense? How can we streamline these processes? What we recognize is that there was tons of overlap between all of the departments. So we got disparate system, disparate processes, and things that were essentially working against each other. We had that lack of access to data because we'd never spent the time to say, from point of lead, what do we do? How do we process this? How do we get this into a sale? How do we process that in our finance? You know, the boring stuff like finance, how does that happen? How does the support happen? How does et cetera, et cetera? And we had not done any of that. People didn't have access to the data, and people didn't know what their roles or their responsibilities were as a result. If you've documented your entire process, that means you're going to have owners throughout each and every part of that. You're going to have departments or people that own those particular steps. If you don't have those, it's all going to go to pot. If you do have people who are responsible, who understand what they are meant to be doing, you're going to have a process that starts to work. So, I think you can. The biggest takeaway that we can take from this is that technology exists to help us achieve what we need to achieve, but we need to know what we want to achieve and how we want to achieve that. We need to understand how we are going to work and how we are going to operate. We've all got families. We all want to go home at 5 o'clock and not work till midnight. You know, we want to create a business that works for us and that works for our clients and allows us all to have a good work-life blend or a good work-life balance. So it's really important as a business to actually stop acquiring straight away. Don't send your finance director or your procurement director to go and find a solution to fix a problem, but actually stop and take a step back and say, okay, let's have a look at our event business right now. This is exactly what we did with Agency Transformation Live this year. We took a step back. We needed to review our processes end to end. So we documented everything that we do right now. We didn't change anything. It's just like, what do we do right now? So we've got this big, massive document, and that gives you the ability then to look at each step and go, well, why are we doing that? And isn't that a duplication of this effort over here? And if we if we do this over here, will that not save all of this work over here? So that's what you want to do. Review as it is, analyze, and see then how can you make things more efficient, and then update those processes. So the important thing is updating that process document and assigning owners to each and every step of that. Okay, marketing department, you're going to own this, blah, blah, blah. At this trigger point, the information or the responsibility gets handed over to the sales team or to the account manager or to whomever. And I know it sounds boring. I'm going to show you why it's cool in a minute. But once you've got all this is going to allow you to break this down and understand what solutions you need. You might therefore decide that Aventito over there is the solution for you because it matches all of your processes, and that is freaking awesome. Or alternatively, you might decide that you need a bit of that and a bit of that and a bit of that, but the important thing is it will match your processes and allow you a beautiful data flow. That is what we're looking to achieve as businesses. So this is just an example of what we did for Agency Transformation Live. When I think this is a common problem actually, you'll get registration, you'll take credit card payment. What you then have to do is you'll have someone in accounts who will go through that. They'll do bank reconciliation and all that sort of stuff, work out, put that there in the account software. Someone's got to copy and paste all of that information into the email marketing system so you can send all your attendees and all that sort of stuff, their emails, etc. So all these different systems, all these steps in the chain and all these people. So what we did was we worked a way of everything happening at this trigger point. So the minute the credit card payment was accepted, the minute Stripe said, yep, we're good, the money's in the bank, we automated there's a great tool called Zapier, which is free. You can take a look at that, and it integrates with an awful lot of systems. We automatically added it to our attendee list that we had in Airtable, because we manage all of our data in Airtable, another free application. We also added them to our welcome sequence. So that went out to SendFox, where we have a welcome sequence that was automatically set up, and that would be triggered. And that's every few days reminding people, hey, you're going to the event, don't forget your packs in the post, don't forget blah, 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 blah. So that would trigger that email sequence. It would also go to QuickBooks, because we were managing all of our data in QuickBooks for the accounts. So going to a QuickBooks, it would find if that person exists. If they don't exist, it would create the customer. It would then create the invoice. It would then create the payment against the invoice and reconcile it. So everything was done. It would then add a task for the actual accountant to review. So if you imagine all of that happened automatically, the only thing the accountant is doing is sanity checking at the end of the day. We're not waiting for them to reconcile our attendee list manually and then send us an exported spreadsheet of all the attendees for us to import into something. We've got our thumbs up from Stripe, and then we trigger all of this automatically, which takes so many people out of the equation and allows a small company like mine, Angle Crown, to actually run the Agency Trailblazer live event. So, my main message and your main takeaway today, I'm basically coming to land, is nail your process before the procurement. So understand how your business operates. Be honest with yourself. Does this suck? Can I make it better? If you can, make it better, and then start to find the tools that are going to meet your needs. Because there are a lot of shiny objects in this room, and some of them are freaking awesome, but you need to make sure that they are matching your business processes. And with that, we are done. If you would like to do the Q&A. Okay, right. So, so Pigeonhole, are there any questions? Tim. That's fine. Oh, one question.
Thank you very much. It's very prescient what you just said. But my feeling is that these insights are probably more applicable to smaller, smaller organizations, maybe a startup or organizations at the start of their sort of, journey. A larger business wouldn't do much of their activity on Airtables, or maybe even QuickBooks. How would your insights scale to larger marketing organizations or event organizations in that regard?
You'd be surprised. So we've worked with a lot of larger companies, and because they'll do quite a lot of events, they actually operate almost like startups. So you've got lots of different groups organizing groups of events using their own stuff. They don't have like a unified stack. So you'll have lots of, it's almost like multiple mini businesses we've experienced. For the larger companies, obviously I've mentioned Airtable, but the same thing applies. If you've got a team of 50 or 100 people in your organization, it's even more important to have a business process, and it's even more important to know what systems have that central stack that you use for managing all of your data. It doesn't have to be Airtables, it could be an enterprise solution from Microsoft. But if you don't have something that meets the needs and don't have a very clear process for all of that flowing through, then you might be successful despite that, not having that. But you could be so much more successful and so much more leaner as a larger organization having those processes. That company that spent £500,000, £500,000, on 2 solutions that I was a part of, we ended up going back to basics and doing that whole process. We actually ended up going back to Salesforce, believe it or not, in the end. So we were on Salesforce, off Salesforce, and then back to Salesforce, and then rolled it out globally because we had a standard process that we could then rock out to the global. They had different head offices throughout the world, and then we rolled that process out to them. So it was 2 massive failures, which eventually led to a success.